The night was silent until a faint crackle of static filled Daniel Carter's old landline phone. A trembling voice whispered, "They know where you are," before the line cut, leaving only emptiness. Daniel sat frozen, the weight of fear pressing into his chest. He whispered, "Who are you?" But the answer never came. A piercing scream shattered the quiet from somewhere down the street. His heart raced as he rushed outside, breath steaming in the cool midnight air. The street was deserted, no sign of life. His eyes darted until they landed on something on the ground. A single object lay abandoned, impossibly out of place. A photograph cracked through the center, marked with strange symbols he could not understand. His pulse thundered in his ears, a sense of dread whispering that this was no coincidence. He bent slowly, hand trembling as he reached toward it, unaware that eyes were watching from the shadows. Daniel's hand shook as he clutched the photograph. His voice cracked as he muttered, "What is this supposed to mean?" The symbols etched into the paper glowed faintly under the street lamp. The night was too still, the silence pressing harder with every heartbeat. He turned slowly, scanning the darkness for signs of life, yet found nothing but empty houses with blank windows staring back. He stepped backward toward his porch, the wooden boards groaning under his weight. Shadows clung to the corners of his yard like they were alive. His pulse quickened, whispering that someone unseen was watching. He tightened his grip on the cracked photograph, its sharp edge biting into his palm, grounding him in a nightmare he could not wake from. The photograph trembled in Daniel's hand, as though it carried a pulse of its own. He lifted it closer, his breath ragged. The crack through the center revealed faces blurred, obscured by time, yet disturbingly familiar. His lips parted, whispering, "I know this face." But the moment he tried to focus, the image distorted, shifting like smoke. A sudden gust rattled the trees, scattering dry leaves across the street. Daniel's eyes widened as the cracked lines in the photograph glowed briefly before dimming. His mind screamed that this was impossible, but the truth pressed against his chest like a hand he couldn't see. He stumbled back into the house, slamming the door shut, heart hammering in his ears. Daniel leaned against the wall, chest heaving. The silence inside his home was heavier than the night outside. His eyes darted toward the darkened window. Do. For a heartbeat, a shape shifted in the glass. A fleeting silhouette watching him from beyond. His stomach dropped and he whispered, "No, someone's here." He lunged for the curtains, yanking them closed, the cracked photograph slipping from his grasp. It landed face up on the wooden floor, the strange symbols glowing faintly like embers in the dark. He crouched, picking it up again, his hands slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs locked in place. The house felt smaller, suffocating, as if the walls leaned closer with every breath. The cracked photograph pulsed faintly in Daniel's hands, as though it carried its own heartbeat. He whispered, "Why me? What do you want?" The air grew colder, his breath visible in the dim glow of the lamp. The silence was broken by a faint creak above, the sound of a footstep on the upstairs floor. His veins turned to ice. He knew he was alone, yet the sound repeated, heavier this time, deliberate. The house groaned under the weight of something unseen. Daniel's grip on the photograph tightened until the edges cut into his palm. Blood smeared across the cracks, blending with the strange symbols. A sense of dread washed over him, as if the photograph had been waiting for this moment. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cracked photograph as dawn crept through the blinds. His hands trembled as he whispered, "Why do I feel like I know you?" Faces in the faded image pulled at his memory, scraping old wounds he thought long healed. A chill seeped into the room, though the heater hummed quietly. He remembered a childhood memory, broken glass, raised voices, and his father's hand slamming down a frame. The weight of abandonment still clung to him. Daniel whispered, "I don't want to go back there." His chest tightened as though the photograph itself demanded he face what he buried. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock that sounded more like a countdown than time passing. A faint knock rattled the front door, pulling Daniel from his spiral. He froze, the cracked photograph clenched in his hand. The knock came again, sharper this time. Daniel approached slowly, every nerve screaming at him to stop. He opened the door to find a tall man in a black coat, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of a hat. The stranger spoke softly. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Daniel's mouth went dry as he muttered, "Who are you?" The man did not answer, only pressing a small folded paper into Daniel's palm. Before Daniel could speak again, the man was already walking away into the fog, vanishing like smoke. The silence left behind was louder than the knock that began it. Daniel unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Strange symbols lined the page, identical to those on the cracked photograph. His breath caught as he whispered, "It's the same." His eyes scanned the paper, but the symbols twisted, shifting as though alive. His skin crawled. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and iron, a reminder of things he could not place. He slammed it down on the table, gripping his hair as panic swelled. "What do you want from me?" His voice cracked in the empty kitchen. The sound of a crow outside pierced the silence, its caw echoing like a warning. Daniel shut his eyes. Trembling, the image of the stranger burned into his mind. He knew he hadn't seen him for the last time. Daniel's chest tightened as he studied the photograph again. The crack across it seemed deeper now, revealing a woman's blurred face. His throat closed as he whispered, "Nah, it can't be." The image shifted, aligning with memories of his mother's laughter, her hand on his shoulder. The woman in the photograph looked like her, but younger, distorted by age and damage. Daniel dropped the picture as if burned. His legs carried him backward, until his back struck the wall. "Why are you showing me this?" he muttered, voice breaking. The silence pressed on, heavier with each breath, the photograph staring up at him like an open wound he couldn't ignore. The knock of memory thundered in Daniel's mind as he staggered toward the back door. Betrayal hung heavy in his chest, though he could not place its origin. He whispered, "Someone close did this." His hand pressed the cold glass of the door, eyes scanning the fog outside. He felt certain he wasn't alone, that the past was moving closer with every breath. His reflection in the glass looked broken, fragments of himself staring back. He muttered, "It was never meant to be hidden." His palm left a smear of blood from the cut he earned clutching the photograph. The fog beyond seemed to shift, a shadow flickering just beyond sight, a reminder that someone always watched. Daniel sat on the porch steps, his body heavy with exhaustion. The cracked photograph weighed in his hand like a stone, impossible to let go. The sound of footsteps startled him, and he turned sharply. A woman stood at the end of the walkway, her face tense, eyes darting nervously. "Daniel," she said softly, "you shouldn't be out here." It was Claire Matthews, an old friend he hadn't seen in years. Her presence both comforted and unsettled him. He whispered, "You know something." Claire shook her head, but her eyes betrayed her. "Not here," she murmured. "They'll hear us." Daniel's chest tightened as suspicion mixed with relief. He wasn't alone anymore, but that only meant the danger was real. Daniel leaned closer, voice sharp. "Tell me what you know, Claire." She shook her head, eyes glistening as she whispered, "It's not safe to say too much. They watch everyone." Her words sent chills crawling down his spine. He asked, "The symbols, the photograph, what do they mean?" Claire hesitated, her lips trembling before she muttered, "It's connected to what happened years ago, to your family." Daniel's blood ran cold, his grip tightening around the photograph. He stared at her in disbelief, demanding, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Claire's eyes filled with guilt as she turned away, whispering, "Because the truth destroys everything." Daniel followed Claire into the living room, the cracked photograph clutched to his chest. Claire set a worn leather journal on the table, her hands trembling. She whispered, "These symbols, I've seen them before." The pages revealed sketches of the same markings, scattered with frantic notes. Daniel flipped through, heart pounding. "This is impossible," he muttered. Claire's face paled as she added, Your father kept this hidden. He knew someone was after him. Daniel slammed the book shut, anger rising in his chest. He abandoned me with nothing, he said, voice raw. The silence between them grew heavy, filled only by the ticking clock. The sound of glass rattling pulled Daniel's attention to the window. Outside, the fog pressed closer, shapes shifting like shadows alive. Claire gripped his arm, whispering, "They know you have it." Daniel froze, staring into the haze. For a split second, a symbol burned faintly across the window pane before fading. He staggered back, heart hammering. "This isn't real," he muttered, but his voice shook with doubt. Claire whispered, "It's only the beginning." Fear rooted him in place as the world outside seemed to breathe, every corner holding unseen eyes. The photograph throbbed in his grip, as though it agreed. Daniel's breath caught as a piercing cry echoed through the fog outside. He darted to the door, Claire shouting behind him, "Don't!" He swung it open to see nothing but the still street. On the sidewalk lay a shoe, small, red, and out of place. His stomach twisted as he realized it belonged to Emily, the neighbor's little girl. He whispered, "No, not her." Claire's face drained of color as she muttered, "It's starting again." Daniel's knees buckled, clutching the photograph tighter as the weight of guilt and terror crashed over him. The tragedy had returned, and this time it demanded his attention. Daniel's knuckles turned white as he clutched the cracked photograph, his eyes darting between the fog and Claire. A man's voice cut through the silence from the street, calm and steady. "Daniel, you've been searching for answers, but you don't realize who holds them." A figure emerged from the mist. Jonathan Hale, a well-dressed man with sharp features and an unsettling smile. Daniel whispered, "I know you." Jonathan stepped closer, his polished shoes tapping on wet pavement. "We've met before," he said softly, "but back then you weren't ready to understand." Claire's breath caught, and she whispered, "Don't trust him." Daniel's heart pounded. The man radiated confidence, but behind his eyes lay something darker. Jonathan extended his hand, palm open, as if offering peace. "That photograph isn't just broken. It's a map," he said smoothly. Daniel frowned, suspicion etched across his face. "A map to what?" Jonathan's smile sharpened. "To the truth your father tried to bury." Claire stepped forward, voice trembling. "Don't listen, he wants to use you." Jonathan's eyes flickered toward her, cold and calculating. "You of all people should know, Claire," he said. "The truth doesn't care about loyalty." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. The photograph burned in his grip, demanding an answer. He whispered, "Why me?" Jonathan leaned closer, voice low, "Because you were chosen the moment it cracked." The silence shattered when a scream tore through the night. Daniel spun, his heart racing, and saw a figure stumbling into the light. Emily's mother, Sarah Miller. Her eyes wild, hair disheveled. She clutched her chest as she cried, "My daughter? Where is she?" Daniel froze, words choking in his throat. Sarah's gaze darted to the cracked photograph in his hands, her face twisting in horror. "That thing, get rid of it," she shouted, her voice breaking. Daniel stepped forward, desperate to explain. But Sarah recoiled, trembling as though his very presence was poison. Claire whispered, "She knows something too." Jonathan stood silently, his smile widening in the chaos. The wail of sirens cut through the night, red and blue lights flooding the street. A patrol car screeched to a stop, and Sheriff Grant Walker stepped out, his uniform pressed but eyes weary. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice heavy with authority. Daniel raised the photograph, stammering, "It's connected. It took Emily." The sheriff's gaze hardened, his jaw clenched. "That again?" he muttered. Claire frowned, whispering to Daniel, "He knows more than he admits." Walker stepped closer, eyes darting briefly toward Jonathan before snapping back to Daniel. "You're stirring trouble where none should be," the sheriff warned. But his tone lacked conviction, as though weighed down by secrets. Tension cracked like thunder as Jonathan's smile faded. He turned sharply to Sheriff Walker, his voice cool and sharp. "You can't protect him forever." Daniel blinked, confused. Protect me? From what? Walker's jaw tightened, eyes shifting toward Daniel before lowering to the photograph. His silence was louder than any answer. Claire stepped in, voice urgent. Sheriff, tell him the truth. But Walker shook his head, muttering, some truths kill faster than lies. Daniel's grip tightened on the photograph, his voice breaking. You've all been hiding this from me. Jonathan chuckled low, stepping back into the fog. Now you see the game, Daniel, and you're already losing. His figure dissolved into the mist, leaving only fear in his wake. The house was suffocating with silence. As Daniel slammed the door shut behind him, Claire hovered near the window, her hands shaking. The cracked photograph lay on the table, glowing faintly as if alive. Suddenly, a knock echoed on the back door, deliberate, slow. Daniel froze, whispering, "It's him again." He crept toward the sound, gripping a flashlight. The door creaked open, revealing a wiry man with wild eyes and a crooked smile. "You're holding something dangerous," he rasped. Claire gasped. "God, not him!" The man tipped his head, introducing himself with a grin. "They call me Ellis." His voice was sharp yet playful, his presence unsettling. Daniel muttered, "What do you know about this?" Ellis smirked. "Enough to scare you." Ellis leaned over the table, his fingers twitching as he traced the air above the photograph without touching it. "Cracks don't just break pictures. They split time, truth, memory." Daniel recoiled, his jaw tight. "Stop talking in riddles." Ellis's grin widened. "But riddles are the only language this thing understands." Claire's eyes narrowed as she muttered, "You're insane." Ellis snapped his gaze toward her, voice low and sharp. "Insane is what they call you when you survive the truth." Daniel's breath caught as the photograph pulsed faintly. He whispered, "You've seen this before." Ellis' face darkened, his smile fading. "I've lived it." Ellis pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket, dropping it onto the table. Strange diagrams, circles, and markings filled the page. Daniel scanned it, whispering, "These are the same symbols." Ellis nodded, his eyes wide. "They repeat across generations. Your father drew these too." Daniel's breath hitched, his voice breaking. "You knew him?" Ellis laughed bitterly. "We all knew him, one way or another." Claire reached forward, voice tense. "Why are you helping us?" Ellis leaned closer, lowering his tone. "Because the longer you hold that photograph, the shorter your future becomes." The room grew colder, the light flickering. The photograph's cracks glowed brighter, illuminating the walls. Daniel muttered, "It's changing." Ellis's tone turned grim. "It reacts to blood, to fear, to betrayal." Claire stiffened, whispering, "Betrayal?" Ellis looked at her, eyes narrowing. "Everyone here is hiding something." Daniel's pulse quickened as he stared at both of them, suspicion clawing at his mind. Claire's lips parted as though she wanted to speak but closed again. Ellis leaned back with a twisted smile. Secrets rot faster when exposed. Daniel felt the air pressing on him, as though the walls were listening. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the house as the photograph split further down the middle. Daniel gasped, lifting it to see new details emerge, a blurred figure standing beside his mother. His voice broke. "Who is this?" Claire stepped back, pale, whispering, "Daunt." Ellis chuckled, though his eyes betrayed fear. "Now you see the traitor." Daniel's chest tightened, his breath shallow as he stared at the unfamiliar shadowed face. The walls seemed to close in, the photograph vibrating in his grip. He shouted, "Tell me who this is." Silence swallowed the room until Ellis whispered, "Someone you trusted more than anyone else." Daniel sat in the dim glow of the flickering lamp, the cracked photograph trembling in his hand. The fracture lines pulsed like veins, glowing faintly with each heartbeat. His chest rose and fell in ragged bursts. Claire whispered, "You can't hold it any longer. It's breaking you." Daniel shook his head, his voice raw. "It's the only way to find the truth." Ellis smirked, leaning in close. "Truth doesn't save, it consumes." The photograph flared, and Daniel saw glimpses of blurred faces shifting, whispering his name. He clenched his jaw, whispering, "Show me everything." The room darkened, the air pressing heavy as if reality itself bent around him. The front door swung open with force, and Jonathan Hale stepped inside, his suit immaculate despite the storm of chaos around them. His eyes burned with certainty as he said, "It's time, Daniel. Hand it over." Daniel stood, shaking, the photograph glowing brighter in his grip. "You knew all along," Daniel spat. Jonathan's smile was thin and sharp. "I didn't just know. I orchestrated it." Claire gasped, stepping back. Ellis hissed, "I told you betrayal was near." Jonathan's gaze locked on Daniel, voice low and commanding. "You were never searching, Daniel. You were delivering." The air tightened, thick with fear and inevitability. Before Daniel could respond, a shadow shifted in the corner of the room. Sheriff Grant Walker stepped forward, his badge catching the lamplight. His face was drawn with guilt, his voice heavy. "He's right, Daniel. This was always meant for him." Daniel's knees nearly buckled. You knew." The sheriff's eyes fell to the floor. "Your father tried to stop it, but I looked away." Claire shouted, "You let this happen!" Walker raised his hands, trembling. "I thought I could contain it." Jonathan's smirk widened. "You contained nothing. You delivered him to me." Daniel's grip on the photograph tightened, the betrayal cutting deeper than the crack itself. The photograph flared violently, filling the room with blinding light. Daniel screamed, clutching it to his chest as visions consumed him. He saw his mother's blurred face, her voice calling his name. Beside her stood a shadowed figure, the same man revealed in the cracks. Jonathan's voice boomed, "He was never your enemy. He was me." Daniel gasped, the truth crashing down. Jonathan had been in the photograph all along, tied to his family's secret. Claire cried out, "Daniel, fight it!" The photograph pulsed harder, the house rattling as though on the brink of collapse. Ellis laughed manically, shouting, "Now you see what can't be unseen." Daniel staggered forward, blood dripping from his palm as the cracked photograph cut deeper. His voice was hoarse but defiant. "You won't take it." Jonathan advanced, fury replacing his calm mask. "You can't stop what's already begun." Sheriff Walker shouted, "Daniel, destroy it!" Claire cried, "It will kill you." Daniel raised the photograph high, trembling but resolute. "Better me than all of us," he whispered. The photograph split in his hands with a deafening crack, shards of light bursting outward. Jonathan screamed in rage, his figure warping in the glow. The house shook violently as Daniel fell to his knees, clutching only fragments of a shattered past. The light faded, leaving silence heavy in the ruined room. Daniel gasped for air, sweat dripping down his face, his hands bleeding where the photograph had torn him. The fragments lay scattered across the floor, glowing faintly before dimming to nothing. Claire knelt beside him, whispering, "Daniel, it's over." But his eyes stared blankly at the pieces, his body trembling. Sheriff Walker stood at the doorway, his face gray with guilt. Ellis chuckled low, the sound hollow. "Over? No, this was only the first break." Daniel tried to speak, but his voice cracked, the weight of his sacrifice pressing against his chest. The house creaked, settling in the silence of what had just been unleashed. Daniel dragged himself upright, his legs shaking. He whispered, "Did I stop it?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. Sheriff Walker muttered, "You delayed it, nothing more." The words sank deep, colder than the night outside. Ellis clapped slowly, mocking. "The cracks don't heal, Daniel. They spread." Daniel's chest burned as he stared at the remnants on the floor. He whispered, "Then it was all for nothing." Claire grabbed his arm fiercely. "No, you gave us time." But Daniel could see it in her eyes. Doubt lingered, and fear would never leave. The silence returned, louder than any scream. A breeze drifted through the broken window, carrying fog inside. From the shadows of the street outside, a familiar figure appeared. Jonathan Hale, still alive, his form fractured but unbroken, his smile sharper than ever. His voice was a whisper that filled the room. "You can't destroy what you are." Daniel's blood ran cold, the realization sinking deep. Claire gasped. "It didn't kill him." Jonathan's gaze pierced through them, his outline shifting like smoke. "The cracks only freed me," he said calmly. Daniel's heart sank. He had given everything, yet the darkness still stood. The fragments on the floor pulsed faintly, echoing Jonathan's words. The air grew colder as Jonathan's presence seeped through the broken walls. Sheriff Walker stepped forward, gun drawn, his hands trembling. "Stay back," he barked, but his voice wavered with fear. Jonathan only smirked, the gun irrelevant in his shadowed reality. Claire clutched Daniel's arm, whispering, "We can't fight him." Daniel's voice cracked. "Then what do we do?" Ellis leaned against the wall, his grin fading into something grim. "You don't fight shadows, you survive them." The room fell silent, broken only by Jonathan's chilling words. "I'll return when the last piece falls." His figure melted back into the fog, leaving the house colder than before. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Daniel fell to his knees, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed on the scattered fragments. Claire crouched beside him, whispering, "It's not over, is it?" Daniel shook his head slowly, whispering, "No, it's only beginning." Sheriff Walker lowered his gun, guilt etching his face as he muttered, "We've doomed ourselves." Ellis chuckled darkly, his voice low. "You broke the mirror, Daniel, but the reflection still stares back." A faint pulse rippled through the fragments, glowing softly, as if waiting. The camera lingered on Daniel's bloodied hand hovering above the shards, before the screen cut to black.